Hi, I'm Julian and welcome to Digital Rack Gear, where we bring you reviews and tips about digital rack gear for music production. This is the first of 4 videos about optimizing your digital rack gear environment. And across these videos we'll look at the connections, maintenance, care and general environment that will help support your gear working for you as trouble-free as possible. This video is about the simple and not so simple audio connections, really covering the basics through to some more advanced stuff. The second video is about caring for your digital rack gear. The third is about different ways of connecting equipment in your studio and is called Gear Connections. And the fourth and final video in this series is Beyond the Gear and about the broader studio environment as it relates to your gear and recording. While none of these videos focus on a single piece of gear, I hope they'll really bring you value for the long run. The idea is to help give great tips for everyone from new users as well as experienced project and semi-pro studio owners and operators. That said, this video is targeted at those unfamiliar with the basics of audio connections, and we'll touch on a few more advanced pieces as well. By far, the commonest types of audio connection you'll find in your studio are Phono and Canon types, but stay to the end as we'll also look at 2 less common types in the studio that you may come across. Alright, so standard Phono connectors are the sort of connections that are used by instruments such as guitars and basses. Sometimes they're used for connecting amps to speaker cabinets, and sometimes they're used for connecting digital pieces of audio equipment, digital rack gear, analog rack gear, and the whole works. And this would be, if you hear the term tip sleeve, that is what it looks like. So there we go, tip sleeve connection. Here's the tip and there's the sleeve. So it's separated by a little black band that you might be able to see there. It is a mono, unbalanced connection, which means that it carries a signal, mono signal, but it's not going to reject RF, and it will lose, when you've got a very long cable such as this, you will lose high end the longer the cable is. So unless you have an active source behind it. So for guitar cable or guitar, this cable will lose, or due to impedance, lose some of the signal. Another type of phono connection, a tip ring sleeve, which has, hopefully you can see that, a little band in it. I'll give you another look there. So this has a tip, a little ring in the middle, which you can see just there, and then the sleeve. And the idea of this is that it's carrying both an active, a neutral, if you like, and a ground. And this is a big size, 1/4 inch size, of what you would normally consider a basic headphone connection, for example. So they come in 1/8, but this is the 1/4 inch size, and that's really common stuff in the studio. Here we have Canon connections, and you'd be familiar with these perhaps with what looks like the end of a microphone and what you might plug into a microphone, but also because these are balanced cables, i.e. they have an active, a neutral and a ground, or a positive, negative and a ground, they are not as susceptible to RF, radio frequency interference, and they'll stand up to longer cable runs as well. So if you're running a cable over a long distance, it really should be a balanced cable. I'll give you a quick view there. That's what your male and female connections look like. The male is the ones with the little prongs on it, and the female is the one which accepts the male. And you'll commonly find those on those Canon types, male and female, on pro level pieces of equipment. Preamps, compressors, certainly reverbs and so on. And they're an important part of your studio connectivity, so I'd definitely suggest you become familiar with those. They're fairly standard in studios. So this is one that a lot of people sort of overlook. This is an RCA cable, and RCA you might be familiar with from the back of a stereo, if you remember what old school stereos look like. So those sort of cables might connect a CD player to an amplifier, but in recording studios they do crop up every now and then. For example, on the back of certain sort of consumer level. This is basically a consumer piece of equipment made by DBX, aimed at those who might have a home stereo and want to make certain changes to the dynamics. And they have, as you'll see, RCA connections on the back. And these sort of boxes are starting to grow in popularity, especially as this is analog, obviously, and as color boxes, effectively. Add a bit of mojo to your sound. Not all of them are great, and some of them may have been upgraded with phono connections on the back to make them easier to interface in. But that's not all. You'll also find 4-track recorders and tape decks, such as the Tascam 234, and also some boss equipment, such as these micro rack units. This is a phaser and an overdrive, and they also have RCA connections on the back. So they've got phono and RCA, so you can sort of cater for both country and western. Okay, so here are a last couple of analog connections. If you have a patch bay, you'll be possibly familiar with these two types. One is called tiny telephone, and it looks a little bit, well, it is like that. It is a tip ring sleeve connection, and it looks like that. And it is, I'd have to give you the specs on screen, but the size is quite small. Slightly bigger than that is Bantam, and this is similar in size to a 1/4 inch. This is similar in size to a 1/4 inch phono, but it is a tip ring sleeve, but it's not a 1/4 inch tip ring sleeve. It's called Bantam, and you'll notice that the actual tip is smaller. So that's actually quite an important connection if you are dealing with older patch bays. So they may use this Bantam type. Tricks for young players in buying old patch bays is to make sure that if you do buy the old patch bay, you get the cables with it, because these can be quite hard to come by, I guess, nowadays. And for a good quality set, they won't wear it. They're pretty solid. They'll stand up to a bit of stress. They're likely to be good quality cables if they're still working and come with the patch bay. So give them a look. So that is tiny telephone and Bantam. So it's almost it for analog connections. Here's one more, and that is DB25. Now DB25 is a standard that you might, if you're older, remember as a parallel connection on printers back in the day. It's actually 25 pins. Often we'll only use 24 of them for 8 channels of balanced audio. But that is DB25, and you'll find that on the back of all manner of equipment, both analog and digital. What are the tricks about this? Well, there are 2 different formats, which I will display here. And I suggest that you investigate, if you buy a piece of equipment with DB25, which protocol it belongs to. So just a trick for young players. I think this might be BNC, British Navy connection. British Navy connection. So this is a BNC connector. You're going to see this most likely in your studio to connect 2 digital pieces of equipment to make sure they're synchronized. One will be the master and one will be the slave to the master. And they will be connected, and the slave will follow the master based on this BNC connection. Interesting story about BNC, the British Naval connection. I want to set this up to be, I want to set up a BNC to be as the output on my guitar. And let me tell you, it worked brilliantly. First of all, the middle is the last thing to connect. The outside is the first thing to connect, which is the ground, so you don't get any pops. Actually, when you plug in your guitar, you can have the amp on, you plug in the BNC and it works. The other thing is it's got a bit of a lock on it. You can twist it and it locks in, so it's far less likely to pull it out of you, pull your cable out when you're performing. I kept that for about a year, but of course BNC connections are not standard on guitar, so you pretty much have to make your own guitar cables. So that idea went out the window. But it was fun while it lasted. So B and C, another important connection if you're synchronizing two pieces of digital gear and you want them to talk to each other and be synchronized, which you do need to do if you're connecting via, well, where word clock is involved. If word clock is not involved, there's two other ways you can actually hook up two pieces of digital gear. Actually, three, actually. One is via RCA connection, and RCA was commonly used in DAT players, for example, between DAT, a digital audio tape, and sound cards. So you could actually connect up via RCA. The other is via fiber optic cable. This goes by a couple of different names: TOSLink. I don't think this has got a name on it, but anyway, these types of cables, optical fiber basically cables, will carry up to 8 channels of digital audio on the EDAC interface, EDAC spec. However, there are new specs that will carry higher bandwidths than the 44.1 and the 48Ks that EDAC supports. So you can carry only 4 channels, but that'll go up to 96K. And I think some equipment, not all equipment, will cater for this, but it's a specification that will allow you to increase the sample rate, but decrease the track count. And I'll try and pop something right here to describe how that relationship works. But that's another type of connection, especially for those of you with like looking at increasing your channel count. ADAT is sometimes loathed, but is extremely useful for increasing your channel count on your sound cards, and this is a very common way to connect them up. And then there are a couple more. So let's talk about this one. This is commonly known as your internet connection, or in technical terms, an RJ45. And this is increasingly of use and value and implemented into digital audio gear. If you watch my video on MIDI interfaces, you'll know that there are MIDI interfaces that actually work over Ethernet, and this is an Ethernet cable. And there are now protocols which will carry audio over this. There's 2 ways to carry audio over this kind of Ethernet cable. One is use it like an analog cable. It's basically got 8, I think, wires in there, and they will carry 4 channels of audio. The other is to actually use it like a digital cable. And I've got a video coming up on how to use it like that to carry audio, and quite a few channels of audio at that, using RJ45. The interesting thing about RJ45 and the cable that RJ45 as a connection supports is that RJ45 connectors are actually really weak, and you don't want to really stress them too much, or you could shear the wires on the inside of the connection. I know this because I've done it. So one way to get around that is to use something called an Ethercon connector. And Ethercons are basically, they look a little bit like a Canon connector on the outside with an RJ45 on the inside, and here is a picture of one. And they're a way of really supporting the connection in a much stronger way. Now, if you're wiring up 2 separate buildings or multiple rooms and you're putting Ethernet connection through tube or conduit or what have you, I do recommend these Ethercon connectors to simply protect the cable to connect the RJ45 end, and also make a better connection. It's basically more pro. I've upgraded to that connection myself. Not all equipment, though, accepts Ethercon. So what do? Well, what you do is you get one of these, which is made by Neutrik, and it is specifically made for Ethercon connectors. So that's what the end of an Ethercon looks like. And as you can see, it has a round slot where you put in the Ethercon connector. But if your piece of equipment doesn't accept Ethercon, you're going to wonder, how do I get my RJ45 connector into it? Well, simply you put the Ethercon in one end and you get a patch cable like this and pop it into the other, and connect that to your piece of gear. So that's how it works. Not a huge fan of that, but the Ethercons are awesome. Okay, last couple. Digital. We have, okay, when you're dealing with audio interfaces, you're going to have multiple options. Nowadays, Thunderbolt is basically the latest type of connection which supports multi-channel audio. We also have USB 3 now. We'll probably have other ones by the time you see this video. Old school, though, a little bit old school. So there's your latest USB type connection, USB 3. But back in the day, used to have something called Firewire, and Firewire is still around, of course. So Firewire has a couple of different specifications of end. That's one of them, and the other looks like that. Not sure if you're going to be able to see that. Hopefully you are. The other one looks like that. So here are the two types of Firewire end. And Firewire I still use. There are a lot of interfaces around still with Firewire, but bear in mind it is now quite an old protocol. I have an adapter here which basically converts this Firewire end to whatever that is, Thunderbolt, I guess, or Lightning, or one of those Apple ones. So there we go. So connectors, you can hook them up. All right, so that's my little bit of a summary on the plethora of audio connections. There's one more which I'm just going to chuck in for good measure. So this is an EDAC connector, which used to be very common on mixing consoles back until sort of like the mid to late 90s. And basically you have these connectors on the back, and then you break out of one of these connections, which hooks up to a cable, and it could hook up to all the rest of your gear via Phono, Canon, or what have you. And they take little pins that go into the end, but that's what a blank looks like. So there we go. So that's another analog connection. So that's it for this episode. We've covered off, I think, as many connection types as I can think of for now. If you think of any others, please put them in the comments below. Hopefully this video has been of use to you. If it has, please hit like and subscribe. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.